And people say, oh, that's just a throwaway line. No, it's not a throwaway line. The stakes are high. There is an enemy that is out there.
And thus did the 43rd President of the United States beat his last press room exit, stage right. He received a couple of cheers and a small applause.
Well, in a moment we'll be going to Washington for the view from there, from the White House press corps and from a political supporter. But here in the studio first, the Respect MP, George Galloway. We all know where you come from on George Bush, but do you at least think his intentions were good, or do you think he's actually a bad man?
I think he's an idiot. I think the world misunderestimated just how much damage one man and his crazed ideology could do. He's bankrupted his own economy, he's brought the world economy to its knees, he's created wars around the world, extremism is vaulting. He even lost his party, the White House, the Senate.
But he meant well.
Well, I don't really accept that. It was a toxic mixture of stupidity and arrogant swagger. And the aircraft carrier event was, in a sense, the perfect crystallization of both. He's a very dangerous man. He killed a lot of people. And the village in Crawford, Texas, gets its idiot back in a few days' time, and we should be glad for that.
You see at the end, he's much more now like the man he was right at the beginning of his presidency. He seems more humble, he seems more sort of big tent-ish, if you like, more understanding of his opponents. He says he's respectful of people he doesn't agree with.
Well, he hanged them upside down and incarcerated them in Guantanamo Bay, the people he didn't agree with. I think this "aw shucks, good old boy, Texan, down home," is part of the act. He was an actor, not as good as Ronald Reagan, and he's made Reagan look like a genius compared to him, I think.
And where does he leave his party, do you think? I mean, from that point of view, is it a good thing from your political perspective?
Yes, it's a pity that millions literally had to pay with their lives' blood to bring about the destruction of the neocon idea. I think the neocons are a busted flush, and the Republican Party will have to reinvent itself as a more centrist organization. So I'm obviously happy about that, but so many people had to die to bring it about.
But are people with your politics able to like America more now as Obama, or the era of Obama ushers in?
Well, I personally never disliked America. I have a shelf full of American books and records, and I'm one of the few people whose great-great-grandmother emigrated from America to here. We hated the government, we hated the role of the United States in the world, and we hope and pray that Barack Obama will be different. And I think he will be different, and I'm looking forward to the next few days, weeks, months and years in the hope that America becomes a better citizen of the world.
But do you think the Gaza situation would be any different if Obama had been sworn in last month instead of this month?
Well, it would have been different even if George Bush Sr. had been the president and James Baker the Secretary of State. Don't forget that they were quite clear that they would cut off military aid to Israel if it continued to do things which fantastically inflate America's problems in the world and everyone's problems in the world, and that's what Israel's doing now.
Stay there for a second. We can go to Washington now and join Suzanne Malvo, who's the White House correspondent for CNN. It was a curious event to watch on television. It seems slightly cold in the room. I mean, and I was wondering, those of you who followed him around for so long, I mean, do you think the same of him as the American people do at the moment, or is there some affection as he goes?
It was really kind of a strange press conference. It started off, he was complimenting and thanking the press for the job that they had done. There have been a lot of moments when the White House and the press corps has not seen eye to eye on a number of things. He was alternately defensive, defiant, and then sometimes reflective is what we heard. He said, you know, sometimes happy, sometimes unhappy, but always joyous is how he called his presidency. He said there's no such thing as a short-term history. He really seemed at moments to be rather emotional, other times to be grappling for the right words, the right explanations, for people to try to understand in that room and perhaps much beyond the room why he made some of the decisions that he did. He actually was quite candid when he talked about some of the mistakes and the disappointments, which we had not heard before. It has been very difficult to get this president to actually talk about those kinds of things.
But without, Suzanne, without giving away your own, politics, which I'm sure you want to keep close to your chest, I mean, how do you as a group view this man now?
Well, it certainly seems as if this is, 8 years together, that this is someone who has really grown into the role and defined his role as the war president, as someone who's accepted the idea, the notion that he is not a popular man, that he will leave his office and the administration with big problems that he has put and left for the next president, President-elect Barack Obama. That he is hoping that at least history will be the judge of him and that will vindicate many of the decisions that he's made. He also, however, does seem to be someone who is at least starting to wrap his mind around some of the decisions that he made and second guessing, thinking, okay, well, perhaps when it came to Katrina and he was flying Air Force One above the city that was underwater, that perhaps, there was a consideration of landing there in New Orleans or Baton Rouge. He had talked about that for the first time.
Suzanne Malveaux, thanks very much. Let's go to Pietro Nivola, Senior Fellow at the Brookings Institute in also Washington. We just had a very robust prosecution, if you like, of all George Bush's mistakes from George Galloway here in the studio. You're rather more in favour of his legacy.
Well, I would say that history will probably be kinder to George W. Bush than is widely assumed at the moment. You have to wait a number of years, but decades from now, people are going to look back and see a president who had initially wanted to embark on a project which he called compassionate conservatism, then got blindsided by some extremely bad luck in the form of September 11th, and actually is finishing his term with another bout of extremely bad luck, the financial meltdown, which happened on his watch but has a longer history than just his tenure.
You make him sound unlucky rather than the idiot that George Galloway describes.
No, I think that's an unfair characterization. He did there were blunders on his during his presidency, indeed, as there are in all presidencies, and some of them were quite serious. But there were also some notable accomplishments.
Like?
Well, for example, if you want to just stick to foreign policy, the fact of the surge is that it pulled the chestnuts out of the fire. Iraq is finally being stabilized. It's a belated success, but and not entirely a full success, of course, but it's a lot better than it was back in 2006. We no longer have to put up with Saddam Hussein and his antics in the Middle East. So chalk that up to George Bush. It was quite courageous, by the way. He's kind of stood alone in ordering the surge.
Okay. George Galloway, what do you make of that?
Well, he's made, in striking down the Iraqi regime, he's made bin Laden and bin Ladenism and fanaticism of all kinds, of course, a much bigger problem. As he himself warned today, that's the biggest threat to the United States. Well, he created more Islamist extremists than anyone could have dreamt of. I think people will look back and count the graves. They'll look at the graves all over the world that he dug. They'll look at the grave he dug for the Republican Party, and they'll look at the grave that is the United States economy at the moment, and how anyone, even from the Brookings Institute, can muster any kind of defense when Bush appears to have given up the ghost himself at that press conference today is beyond me, I must say.
George Galloway, Pietro Nivola, and Suzanne Malveaux, thank you all very much indeed. And later, at least the satirists will mourn the end of the Bush presidency. Rory Bremner talks to us live about the man who became a gift to comedians and satirists around the world.